In July 1765, George Grenville was forced out of office 3½ months before the Stamp Act was to take effect. He had become personally unacceptable to the king. In Grenville's place came Charles Watson Wentworth, the second Marquis of Rockingham, the first Lord of the Treasury. Rockingham tried to get the Stamp Act repealed, calling upon the persuasive abilities of William Pitt to help him convince Parliament. In the American colonies, there was considerable unrest and dissatisfaction. Responding to a letter from the Massachusetts Assembly, 9 colonies, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, and South Carolina, sent delegates to meet in Federal Hall on Wall Street in New York City in October 1765 to, quote, consult together on the present circumstances of the colonies, end quote. Unfortunately, the plan to meet was complicated by a number of unforeseen events. The delegates from Virginia and Georgia were prohibited to attend by their colonial governors. Delegates of Maryland, New Hampshire, and North Carolina were prevented from attending due to a host of other problems, a smallpox outbreak, a financial crisis, and even the proroguing of the assembly by a royal governor. The Stamp Act Congress, as it was called, nevertheless, became the first General Congress of the colonies, convened without the authority of the king. Consequently, the Stamp Act Congress was regarded by the king as a dangerous tendency in and of itself. Indeed, although acknowledging that His Majesty's subjects in the colonies owe the same allegiance to the Crown of Great Britain that is owing from his subjects within the realm, and all due subordination to that august body, the Parliament of Great Britain, the Stamp Act Congress nevertheless passed 13 resolutions directed to the King, the Lords, and the Commons, shown here in the Providence Gazette of October 19, 1765, all rejecting any claim of Parliament to tax the people of the colonies and deny them trial by jury, as the colonies had no representatives in that body. Beyond the Stamp Act Congress, local organizations within each colony were formed to campaign against the government exceeding its authority, whether by a little officer or a king, as seen in the Boston Gazette of November 18, 1765. Many of those local organizations referred to themselves as the Sons of Liberty. The Sons of Liberty denounced each stamp as a badge of slavery. The entire effort was directed to prevent the Stamp Act from taking effect. Tax collectors were harassed and threatened. Some were tarred and feathered. Before long, many tax collectors refused to serve because of fear for their safety. Effigies of tax collectors were hung on hastily constructed gallows. In New York City, Royal Governor Cadwallader Colden's effigy was carried down the streets and burned along with his carriage. British troops were brought to the city. Many tax collectors and loyalists fled from the colonies. It became impossible to enforce Parliament's act. Beginning with New York and Connecticut, the Sons of Liberty established communication networks and entered into certain reciprocal and mutual agreements with the Sons of Liberty in other colonies, as set forth in this February 5th, 1766 letter to John Adams from the Sons of Liberty. Before the end of 1765, the lower houses of legislatures in 8 other colonies approved resolutions condemning the Stamp Act and denying the right of Parliament to tax the American colonies. The debate to repeal the Stamp Act in the House of Commons began in January 1766, and William Pitt re-entered the fray, arguing,
"Everything the Grenville ministry did was wrong. The kingdom has no right to lay a tax upon the colonies. At the same time, I assert the authority of this kingdom over the colonies to be sovereign and supreme. The colonists shared the rights of all Englishmen, were bound by England's laws, and were subject to all the protections of its constitution. And the crucial one in this case was the right to be taxed by one's representatives."
Pitt continued, echoing the objections voiced by the colonies.
"Who in England represented the Americans? The Knights of the Shire? The representative of a borough which perhaps its own representative never saw? It is another absurdity, the most contemptible idea that ever entered the head of man." William Pitt.
Many members of Parliament were offended by Pitt's remarks. Member Henry Conway moved to resolve that Parliament possessed the power to make laws binding on the colonies in all cases whatsoever. The resolution became known as the Declaratory Act. 60-year-old Benjamin Franklin of Philadelphia, then a spokesman for the colonies in London, was called before Parliament by the Rockingham Ministry in early 1766. Franklin reassured Parliament of the colonies' loyalty to Great Britain, but explained that they were harmed by the destructive taxes. He then told Parliament that Grenville's policies had inspired a movement for economic independence in America. Repeal of the Stamp Act, he said, would cause the colonies to consume British manufactured goods again. In response to Franklin's warnings and assurances, Parliament, in March 1766, passed a bill repealing the Stamp Act, but that same day also approved the Declaratory Act over Pitt's vigorous objections. In the late spring of 1766, ships sailing into colonial harbors brought news that the Stamp Act had been repealed. The news raced through the colonies, causing celebrations that turned into near riots. In New York City, the celebration was particularly rowdy. As colonial assemblies reconvened, a few sent resolutions of gratitude to the king. Among the colonists, a sense of distrust grew against not only those in Parliament who voted to enact the Stamp Act, but even those who had voted to repeal it. The Declaratory Act gave the colonists a solid reason to have reservations. George Mason of Virginia may have expressed the reservations of the colonists best when he publicly stated that Great Britain looked upon the colonies as that of a master to a schoolboy.
"We have, with infinite difficulty and fatigue, got you excused this one time. Pray, be a good boy for the future. Do what your papa and mama bid you. But if you are a naughty boy, your parents and masters will be obliged to whip you severely." George Mason.
In the wake of the repeal of the Stamp Act, the colonists found that individuals who supported Great Britain in the crisis were defeated for election or re-election to colonial assemblies by large margins. And those who supported organizations like the Sons of Liberty were elected. Unintentionally, the passage and repeal of the Stamp Act had in large measure united the colonies, amplifying and consolidating the colonists' positions on governance.